Hello, and welcome to Mission Matters Live, a program focused on promoting a spirit of mission among the people of God in the Archdiocese of Chicago. My name is Megan Mio, and I'm the director of the Global Mission Office, and our engineer is Mike. This month, we are here with two people who have been to the ends of the earth. Father Scott Garrett ministers in the Archdiocese of Anchorage, Juneau, in Alaska. For the past 15 years, he's been pastor of Holy Rosary Parish in Dillingham, which includes St. Paul Mission. The mission is made up of St. Teresa in Naknek and St. Peter the Fisherman in Clark's Point, and 30 other remote villages along the western part of Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. None of these areas are accessible by road, and so he must fly a plane between each site to minister in person with those communities. He came to know us here in Chicago thanks to Malina Baer. She is a multimedia specialist, originally from Greenville, Wisconsin, and is a graduate of DePaul University. She now lives in Lincoln Park. Malina was one of the inaugural Gabriel Fellows with our Archdiocesan Radio and TV office. She made the connection with Father Scott and recently unveiled a film that showcases Father Scott's ministry in rural Alaska called Ministry at the Edge of Alaska. We'll hear more about that film a little bit later, and you're seeing an image on the screen if you're watching us while they were filming that particular film. But let's get to know each of you a little bit more right now. Father Scott and Malina, thanks so much for joining us and welcome. We have Father Scott here, of course, by Zoom. Amazing that we can get a great signal all the way out there in Alaska, and Malina's here in studio. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I have Starlink, and I got that on my roof, and it actually works pretty well. So it's really amazing because I'm really out here in the middle of nowhere. But thank you, Megan, for having me here, and Malina, thanks for taking the time to come over. I know it's kind of different, but it's great to see you again.
Okay.
Do you want to hear a little bit about myself then?
Yeah, so we can get started with introductions. So I wanted to just ask you, Father Scott, kind of broadly, what is your background? Are you originally from Alaska? How did you discern to become a priest? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, I can go clear back to my birth because that's kind of where everything began at my baptism.
Yeah.
My father was a Catholic and my mother wasn't. I think she was a Lutheran, actually, my mother. So anyway, they got me baptized my father was in the Air Force, and Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, the Air Force there, I got baptized Catholic. And it wasn't but a year later when my parents got divorced. And so my mother took me and my sister to Oregon, and she remarried there. And they remarried in a Christian church. And so I was not raised Catholic. My parents go, they got married in the church, and then they didn't attend church. And they made my brother, I had a stepbrother. She had another child, and my stepbrother Skip and I used to walk to the Christian church by ourselves, and until we were in 7th grade. Then my mom goes, well, if you don't want to go to church, you don't have to go to church. So I said, okay, great. I don't want to go to church.
Good deal. Yeah.
So we didn't go to church. And then when I graduated high school, I went into the military. That was the Air Force. And I was going in boot camp there, and they gave me this choice. They go, look, you can either stay in here and clean the showers out with this toothbrush and scrub everything, or you can go to church. And I go, well, that's a no-brainer. So I went into church, and it was nice. It was a Christian church there on base, and it was kind of nice. And so then I got out of the service, and I followed my brother, my stepbrother. He went up to Alaska. And I followed him up there because I went up there and took a vacation, and I was catching salmon right and left, and everyone was flying airplanes, and I just fell in love with Alaska. So I quit my job at the mill there where my stepdad worked, and drove my little Datsun pickup with my dog Bud all the way up to the Alcan Highway, and I tried to and I got a job as working with a carpenter for a little bit. And then I got a job with Arco, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, I got to go back to college. So I went up to the University of Fairbanks and enrolled in the business program up there.
Okay.
And I met this guy named Eric Williams. And at the time, I didn't know, I was really into my faith, but it was Mormon. I went to, I was going to the Mormon church at that time for about 6 months. And I went up to the University of Fairbanks and met this guy named Eric Williams. And he goes, why don't you go to my church? And I go, well, I'm going to the Mormon church. Why don't you go to my church? And so we made it we said to each other, well, you go to mine and I'll go to yours. So he went to my church, the Mormon church, for a while. And then the next weekend I went to his church. And I'll tell you, I just fell in love with it. I could not believe it. I walked into the doors of the church and it was like my baptism, it just all came together for me. And it just struck me that this is where I need to be. God blessed me with this place in Alaska that I love. He put me in the church, he baptized me, and this is where I am, and this is where I need to be. And it was just amazing. It was amazing. And so I went through, after I became confirmed up there in Alaska, I started teaching, and I was a reader, and I was leading youth ministries and all that. And then when I graduated, I went down to Anchorage and I started working there at the airlines and during the summers. And then I went to graduate school at the University of Oregon because I wanted to get my master's degree. And it was there the Dominicans said, have you ever really thought about becoming a priest? And I go, that's the furthest thing from my mind. And it definitely was. There was no way I was going to become a priest.
Sure.
And so anyway, I graduated and went back to Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where my calling to the actual priesthood came in. I'm laying in bed. I was attending church, with my friend and every Sunday. And I was laying in my bed one night, and all of a sudden I just, this never happened to me before in my life, but, out of a dead sleep, I just sat up in my bed, and the first thought into my mind was, you have to become a priest. And I'm going, this is stupid. There's no way I want to become a priest. And so I went back to sleep.
Yeah.
And a couple months later, same thing. It's strange to be laying in bed asleep and then all of a sudden just sit up, and I did it a second time. You have to become a priest was the first thing in my mind. And, I just go, I don't want to do that. And so the third time it happened, I said, this is something that God is telling me that I have to do.
That's biblical.
And so I went to Our Lady of
calls.
Guadalupe Parish in Anchorage, and Sister Kathleen, I knock on her door and I go, Sister, I think I have to become a priest. And so it took me another 3 or 4 years, because I really didn't want to become a priest, of going through, the training, and I had a vocation director, and I took a bunch of spiritual direction, and I just, I was telling him, I really don't want to do this, but I know I have a strong call. And so there it is. I became a priest and went to the seminary. And, when I first came up to Alaska, I got my pilot's license. So that really helped out a lot, because I knew I wanted to be out in the bush where I could fly my airplane.
Right.
And that's where God sent me. So really excited.
That was a skill that the diocese needs, someone who can travel by plane, get yourself places where you need to be. That's amazing. So you were ordained for the Archdiocese there in Alaska, correct? And you've always served in that region?
Yes. I was, Archbishop Schweitz ordained me in 2003, May of 2003. And, the thing about the diocesan priest is that, first of all, you have to love where you are, because the diocesan priest stays in the area. So I have to stay in the Archdiocese of Anchorage-Juneau until I retire. And so the beauty of that was that I knew in my heart that God had blessed me with this place in Alaska that I just love. And so it was really a great fit.
It was a marriage of many different things that kind of came together. You mentioned about just sitting up in the middle of the night. You know, that is extremely biblical. Isn't it the story of calling of, who was it?
Yeah, David, I think it was, no, I think it
One of the
was, it might have been
prophets?
King David that, or Isaiah, one of the prophets kept
Yeah,
hearing a call from God
it's the
and
here I
walked out
am.
there and said, am I being called? And he said, no. And, he wasn't sure who was calling him, and he went back to sleep and got up again. But yeah, it was real similar to that.
That's
But the thing
amazing.
is, you can't really become a diocesan priest unless our diocese thinks you have to have a strong calling.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a strong calling, you have no business going to the seminary because, you're just wasting everyone's time.
It is
And
a
so
major commitment.
mine was so strong, but I didn't even want to go to the seminary. I just didn't want to. I was
Now I'm
first,
thinking
I
of
was
Jonah
rich
and the
and
whale.
famous, and I had a business
Okay.
degree.
Wow. Yeah, you're fighting it the whole way. Well, calling is calling. What can you say?
Calling and calling. I couldn't get away from it. I
Cannot
tried though.
deny.
Believe me, I tried.
God is relentless. Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll hear more about your ministry, I think, a little bit later, but I'd like us to talk a little bit to Malina now. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your passion for filmmaking, how you wound up here as a fellow, and a little
Sure.
about yourself.
So I'm actually from Wisconsin, but I'm in Chicago because I attended DePaul University. I studied film and television there. I got a concentration in cinematography and a minor in documentary production. And so I graduated in 2023 in June, and I saw that the Gabriel Fellowship was being, this is like the first program, and I was really interested. And there was a component of making a documentary. And as someone who's interested in documentary, I was like, this would be a great opportunity to first kind of start my career. So I applied for the Gabriel Fellowship. I was accepted, and now I've been working at the Archdiocese as a multimedia journalist, and I got to make a film about Father Scott's mission in Alaska. So yeah, it's been really great.
It's very hands-on experience, right?
Yes.
I mean, you did the whole thing. We'll hear more a little bit about the details of that, but you chose the subject matter, you
Yes.
determined how to make it happen, how to edit.
Yeah. So actually what's kind of interesting is we were supposed to pick something potentially in Chicago, and I kind of went a different avenue, but I actually was just researching different ways in which people practice their faith, or kind of maybe more remote ministry is what I was interested in. And I thought, okay, what's a unique mode of transportation? There's people that take a snowmobile to serve, and then I found Father Scott, and he flies a plane, and I thought that would be really great to capture visually. So I contacted him, I gave him a call, and initially I don't think he believed who I was, because I think it's kind
I
of
thought it was a scam.
yeah, kind of it's an odd request to be like, hi, my name is Malina, But eventually, once we got all the details kind of ironed out, I actually work for the Archdiocese, and I'm a part of this program, and I'd love to document your ministry. That's kind of where it evolved from. So I actually just, from Google, I was looking it up, and I think I saw a news article. I think some radio station in Alaska had done a piece, and I looked up his website, and I called Holy Rosary Parish, and yeah.
The rest is history.
Yeah, and he was super willing to, participate in that, and that was super great. Yeah.
This was a good pairing too, because he was so open to share anything and everything, any question that you'd ask, and let you ride along and film things and everything.
Yeah.
So I just want to know a little bit about yourself too, though. You're a practicing Catholic.
Yeah.
Grew up Catholic?
I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I even went to college, and it was a Catholic college, and now I'm working at the Archdiocese.
Yeah, that was the other thing. So you wanted a hands-on experience. You're interested in documentaries, so the Gabriel Fellowship made sense in that way.
Yeah.
But it was also an opportunity to use media to share Catholic
having
news,
an understanding of faith, I think could be important in this position, because you're working with people that are, you need to be knowledgeable about, who you're working with, and what type of ministry you're documenting. So I think that was a great combination of film and faith. I think that was,
that drew you in too.
Yeah,
Right?
it did.
I mean, we talk here because, of course, I work with our radio and TV team to film these interviews, and Malina works with them too in your fellowship.
Yeah.
That we want to put good news pieces out there, and that sometimes we feel like the church isn't known for so much of what we do. And particularly, I think the global mission aspect of it too, because it's very hidden, and in mission and ministry in places, the ends of the earth, places that we haven't personally experienced, kind of corners of the earth. So
that was kind of my reasoning for making this documentary. I kind of wanted to find a subject matter that wasn't seen in like mainstream media, like something that that people could recognize, like exists in this space, and I don't know, to highlight Father Scott's mission because it's important, and I wanted people to recognize and see that.
Yeah. I always kind of think about it as like, I think if people knew more of what was going on, that our leaders, our communities of faith that are working and acting in the world, we would be proud to be Catholic, to say that's my church, that we're bringing hope to people in these different situations, and how important, of course, presence is in ministry. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But, I thought maybe it would be helpful. I mean, we just talked about this is maybe a corner of the world that folks here in the Chicagoland area maybe are not familiar with.
Yeah.
So we could talk a little bit about what does it mean to live and minister in Alaska. And I know Father Scott uses this language of the ends of the earth, which is an allusion to Acts 1:8. During this Easter season, Jesus sends us forth to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, to the ends of the earth, Alaska certainly being one of those ends. So maybe, Father Scott, you can get us started, but tell us about Dillingham, where your primary parish site is, and each of those little mission sites. What's life like in this part of Alaska?
Yeah, well, the ends of the earth is really fitting because we have in Dillingham itself, it's one of the larger villages, and it has about 2,000 people in it. And the ends of the earth comes in because every road just dead ends into the tundra. I mean, we have a road system small enough, but if you drive to the end of it, there's nothing, you can't drive anymore. It just ends. And so the whole village is like that. You cannot get in here unless you fly in. And so that's one of the biggest things for most of these villages out here, because if you want supplies, unless you live off the land, if you want supplies, you have to have a runway all year long, cleared off from the snow and ice and all that. And you have to be able to get an airplane in there for your supplies, your food and your spiritual, your missionaries and all that to get in there. And so that's one of the biggest things. And that's located where I'm located. Is if you look at Alaska, you got the body of Alaska, and then you have the Aleutian chain coming out here. Well, I'm kind of right in the crux here. It's called Bristol Bay, and there's water, all the water's around in here. And so it's the best fish. They say it's the world's best fishing for sockeye salmon, and it is. It is just phenomenal. So here in Dillingham, a lot of people, if you live here for free, you can, and I've done this almost every year. I take my net, I put it out, not even, half a mile from here into the river, and I set it up and I watch the salmon hit the net. I usually only need about 20 a year to last me, and then I just pull the net in. I take him clean them up and put them in my freezer. And everyone does that here. They all get the salmon and they get it for free. And then you got the commercial fishermen who come in here from outside of Bristol Bay, who, their family, they may have moved away, but then they all return for the 2 or 3 month fishing season. And so they overpopulate the area. In fact, they're moving in right now. It's in May right now, and all the fishermen are coming in.
Right.
And so we have a population of about 2,000, and we have the subsistence fishing. We have a small hospital, actually, that we can get people ready, but you usually have to medevac them out because it's not a big hospital. They can take care of some minor things. But the smaller villages, a plane will go out and get the people that are injured or hurt or sick and bring them into Dillingham. They'll prepare them, and then they'll medevac them to Anchorage. And so that's another big issue that we have in these small villages. And then we have the elders. we have a lot of Yupik. There's seven tribes in Alaska. One of them is Yupik. You know, there's like Inuit. There's actually Eskimo is a small tribe. Athabascan, several more. And the Yupiks, um, they kind of inhabit just this little area of Bristol Bay. And the elders, the thing about the elders is elders in the Alaska Native realm, they are very well taken care of. In fact, they're looked upon by the younger people as, you know, heroes of people who are really knowledgeable, and they listen to them, they take care of them, and it's just the whole different it's just very different from how I was raised, you know. They really take care of the elders, and they're very artistic as well. In fact, one of the people, her name is Mun. She made this. She was like almost 80 years old when she made this, and look how intricate it is. It's just very, very small and intricate. And she died shortly after she made this, and she was from a little village called Clark's Point, and they actually named the new community center that they built after her. And so I was probably fortunate enough to get the very last one that she probably ever made. And so they're very artistic. And there's there's usually in Dillingham we have a blessing of the fleet and the blessing of airplanes once a year. In fact, I have a meeting next week about the blessing of the fishing fleet, and we do a big thing about the people who have died, and we ring a little bell, you know, and announce their names. There's hundreds of people who the ocean has taken. And you know, during their fishing excursions, and so it's quite the people in Dillingham, they gather around the bell and they all listen to. It's an ecumenical service, so all the ministers from different parishes come and say a different prayer from each church, and then we announce the people who have died, and then they ring the little bell for each one. So it's pretty amazing, and accessibility, like I said, you have to get in here by air travel. And then the St. Paul Mission, all these little villages, there's some 30 of them within a 100-mile radius of where I live here and stationed here in Dillingham.
All spread out, right? I mean, I know even in my conversations with you, the weather kind of takes precedence over anything, really. Like, you can have a plan for the day, but if the weather does not allow it, if it's too dangerous, as you said, even in the water itself has taken lives, and certainly the weather when flying, I'm sure, is a danger. So that's a pretty big factor, these extreme conditions.
Huge factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want me to talk a little bit about that, the challenges out here?
You know what? Let's save that conversation for a little bit later in our interview. I think we're going to take a break, but we're going to come back and talk more about what life is like, what ministry looks like in this part of Alaska, and Malina's film. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back to continue our discussion about ministry at the edge of the world.